Now let's talk for a minute about destinations. The primary destination for the slaves who were brought from West Africa to the Americas was the Caribbean, the Greater Caribbean. Early on, Barbados was one of the great centers of the slave trade. Jamaica would end up being one of the greatest. Another for the French imperial system was what was called Saint-Domingue, or in today's terms, Haiti, the crown jewel of the French system. To the Caribbean, almost 5 million people were shipped. Almost 5 million. 4.2 million arrived alive. That's almost half. That's almost half the total. It is not an accident that this was the great center of sugar production. The sugar industry drove the slave trade for many, many years. It was an especially brutal regime, as you know. The second most important destination was Brazil. Portuguese Brazil, also the home of a very lucrative plantation system. To Brazil, roughly 3.5 were loaded on the ships, and 3.2 million arrived. This is about 36% of the total, a little more than a third. So overwhelmingly, the Caribbean and Brazil are the two most important sites for the slave trade. Now, if you're just keeping track of the numbers as I give them to you, you're going to see that these two areas account for the overwhelming majority of the slaves shipped to the New World, right? So where does the United States come into this? Well, as it turns out, the United States was a rather minor partner in the slave trade. The current estimates are that maybe 370, as many as 400,000 people were loaded onto vessels bound for North American ports, the greatest of which, by the way, would have been Charleston, South Carolina, and that somewhere around 310,000 were delivered alive. Now, that's about 3.5% of the total. And the numbers may be a little higher across the board, maybe 4%, okay? But don't be deceived. The fact that mainland North America received a fairly small percentage of the enslaved Africans belies the fact that it is going to become one of the most powerful slave systems over the course of the 18th and early 19th century. The main difference is demographic. The slave population in North America, owing partly to climate, growing season, and the kinds of staple crops produced, the enslaved population was able to reproduce itself, whereas that was very uncommon in the Caribbean. So, those are